Good. So we're recording. Hey, Martin. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. Very good to see you. And it's what are we? Monday evening here in the UK, and a bit later where you are in Sofia.
Yeah, it's already dark here. So.
Is it? Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm still. Yeah, I've got the blind drawn here because the sun is streaming in, cooking me. So if I go more and more lobster red as we're sat here, that's what's happening.
This is quite an event. This is probably happening every day between people, talking from different time zones. But here being pitch dark and with you being still, the sun is quite out there. And the thing happening online right now with the two time zones that dark here, like it's quite an event.
It is.
If we think about it.
Yeah.
There's something to it. I'm not sure what.
You're in my future.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. My son does this thing where he says, can I remember it? I've come from the future. I've come, but I'm only 5 seconds in the future and I can only behave in exactly the same way that I would do. And then he stops and he goes, oh, I've come from the future, but I'm only 5 seconds into the future and I have to behave in a way that's exactly the same. Oh, I've just come from the future. And this goes on.
So this is quite rightly so.
How have things been? How's your week been since we talked last?
Well, as I was mentioning to you from just several minutes ago before recording, the event that I was not really waiting for to happen, but it really happened, is that my family at home and several people around me all have a very strong hesitation of if we have the coronavirus or not. Mainly my partner, she's been working in a field where online presence and utilizing the online communities and online platforms, it's not really working for them. So they've been working live. And one of the people that they've been meeting lately, last Monday, one of the people meeting and several people around him, they had the virus with no symptoms whatsoever. But several people around them called back after meeting this one people and just tracing the lines back to him. And saying, well, after meeting with you and the incubation period, the virus is already arrived within our bodies. We don't feel well, we don't breathe well. So we went there, tested with the PCR tests, which proved to be probably the strongest evidence we have right now of scientifically proving something. And they all had it. So my partner went home, and the next day she called me and said, well, bad news. And I was having all sorts of fantasies, automatic right now. What's going on? And she said, well, I met with someone, it was a working environment with 15 people around, and this person just jumped right in the conference hall that we were in, hugged everyone, just jumped straight to it. And it happens that he has it, and right now some of us might have it, and you including, because she's a contact person for him and I'm for her. So we went to test today, this morning, quite an unpleasant thing, someone sticking something in your nose.
Is that how it works? The swab.
Yeah, looks like well, the legends about it. People sharing their experience with that, quite over exaggerated, but still very unpleasant. And this is the PCR test that the medical doctors really rely on. They say that the most accurate results are if you do two out of two positive. So doing just one proving positive or negative might not be the best case scenario that you're choosing. So probably in a week or so we'll do one more. But I mean, it was quite an event, and as I shared with you, quite a ground for reflection open right there. Just for my own self, for my family, for people I know, and for the people just waiting in front of the lab this morning. This was a very shocking at the first few seconds sight. Then it became curious. Then at one point became tragic for a few minutes. Then it was like switching between, you know, the circles of hell in Dante's hell.
The Inferno.
Yeah. And you could see several people being there to test themselves, just pure-mindedly planning, I will go there, and whatever the cost, I want to ensure that I'm not a threat to anyone without realizing that.
Yes.
But there were people that were asking, well, how much does this one cost? And they're saying, well, this is the cheapest one, but it's not really an accurate test, so we don't advise you going for it. And when the same person asks, well, which is the most accurate? Well, this is it, but it's 5 times pricier than the previous one, but it's very strong in evidence. And you could see the person just saying, nah, give me the cheap one.
Yeah.
So there was an exchange right there.
Yeah.
So very intense 1 week almost. You know, being stuck at home with the people I'm with, and today doing that.
Yeah.
So,
that sounds intense.
Yeah,
or every part of it sounds intense. Yeah. How have you been feeling in yourself? How are you? Just as you, how's your body? How's your kind of mood in relation to all of that?
Well, knowing myself, I'm never the expressive type of person. So my impulse is always do a U-turn and just stick right back. So they circulate within me. And even if you don't see anything on the outside, there's something working here. So if I'm anxious, I have a high blood pressure. If I'm happy, I might not smile as wide, but I can feel it right here.
Yeah.
So the event with the hesitation, if I have the virus in my family, if either of them has it, I was the one at home that didn't show any specific, oh my God, what we will do if that thing happens to be. So I was the one that was really calm down, sit down.
Yeah.
And I was having this lying to myself. Everything's fine. But without noticing, because I've been trying a little bit of woodworking these days.
Okay.
I have some tools laying around, so I'm having some logs and I'm working through them. I'm doing some kind of furniture and stuff like that. I really enjoy it. But without noticing and with saying don't worry, I made 2 tables in 1 day. So there's a lot circulating within that needs to go out of the probably the anxious impulse I had with all of that.
Yeah.
So with my own self, this is some kind of reflection that I managed to to catch me there as it was going on. And
it was very, very productive for furniture this time. You want to boost the Bulgarian furniture making part of the economy, just put everyone in this uncertainty around whether or not they have the disease, and
just flourishing, one other thing that I've been trying to get from other people telling me they're experiencing that, but I've never had the chance to firsthand experience or see how it works, is that when you have this RAR file installed within you and unzipped, so do I have the coronavirus? This is the title of it. And when it's with you and within you and in your thoughts, feelings, and everything around that, you start misinterpreting or even the whole, let's say from neuroscience perspective, the whole cognitive functioning just becomes extremely distorted. Even the slightest scratch in my throat or someone at home telling me, oh, But just even not saying a word, just going with the ooh, just an exclamation about something hurts. One of the first things is stay calm. This is not the virus.
Uh-huh.
But parallel to that thought, there's always the second one that's really battling with it and saying, no, no, this is the virus. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's a constant neck in neck
yeah,
race.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
last lap of that.
Hmm.
Um, Even for my own self, I've never been someone that's excited about symptoms, or even if something hurts, I can stay with it. I can see where it comes from.
Yes.
I can plan on how to take care of it. And right now it's just a simple cough, and I'm like, what is that? And
Yeah,
how can I make sense of it? And the hesitation always kicks in.
yeah.
So even perception is really
Interesting.
distorted
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
and there's a sense of revelation,
Uh-huh.
really packed, really compressed sense of revelation.
Okay.
Someone else telling me 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, oh, but whenever I cough, I'm always thinking this is a coronavirus, and I'm always saying, don't bullshit yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Take a hold of yourself. We all realized our shit stings too, so it's time to realize the same for yourself. And right now, this thing got to me, and it's like a completely new thing opening up.
Yeah,
But it's not clear-minded. It's more like foggy-minded,
yeah. Okay.
misty, something around that.
Yeah,
So it's an anti-revelation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Anti-revelation. I like it. Just what you were describing there about the two thoughts kind of in parallel like this as well, tending this way or this way, made me think of wood, actually. And then you mentioned woodworking and working with wood. And I don't pretend to understand very much about the processes. There's been a long time since I did any. But it made me think of the way compression works in a bow. So if you
Mhm.
want to make a bow, you need two types of wood for different parts of the bow, or other materials these days, but wood would be the traditional one. And yeah, just the way you even did it with your fingers, if it tends this way and this one, the next thought arises, it is, it isn't. It's
Yeah.
convex, it's concave. It's the kind of interplay of those two that allows compression to be drawn into the implement. Like
Mhm.
what might be, to the extent that we're all under that kind of larger collective pressure or condition of do we, don't we, is it, isn't it, have I, haven't I, well, all the time on one level, but specifically under the pandemic conditions and the lockdown that we've been talking about all these weeks. Yeah, just an image really that comes to mind of being drawn like a bow, which immediately then gives rise to thinking about, well, what or who is the arrow that may be, or the projectile that may be launched by this bow? Who's drawing it, and to what end? What are they aiming at? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and the string, of course, that's being pulled. Um, yeah, but also the symbology of it. It's a very potent image, isn't it? It's a very
Very.
not quite universal. I think I'm remembering this right, but I believe all cultures invented the bow, with the exception of on the Australian continent. I think that native Australians and Aboriginal people didn't have bows. They didn't need bows. They didn't take that particular course. But pretty much every human culture elsewhere on the planet went down the bow kind of route. So it's a very recognizably early human tool, weapon, hunting piece of kit. And yeah, it shows up in all kinds of symbolism, doesn't it? But I guess in the forefront of my mind was the kind of astrological image of Sagittarius as the bow being drawn by the centaur often, and that kind of single pointed purpose, that, yeah, hitting the mark. Interesting. wasn't expecting that to kind of enter into our conversation, but just as a kind of feeling the edges of something in the way you were describing, relative to the intensity and the compression. That's what comes to mind for me.
I've just I had this thought that there's something very archetypal about that, but I'm hesitating between the bow being an archetype by itself,
yeah,
as a separate, but as the tool being an archetype by itself, or is it a prototype of something? So there's probably a hesitation between the two, at least in my mind. I'm not able to unstick them.
Yes.
And this came to me just now because of thinking on the different variations between cultures and between time periods. The Japanese bow, that's probably 2.5 meters high. The Chinese bow, that's just a plank from several plies of wood.
Yes.
The European, let's say, bow, that's really has a distinct shape and very different string and so on.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's a bow.
Yes. Yes.
So this is what I'm trying to get to. If it's an archetypal.
Yes, and makes me think as well. Absolutely fascinating. There's a whole kind of universe of interesting things in there. Makes me think of, in the one sense, precision. So one thinks of the solitary bowman, be he hunter or she, god, goddess, armed with a bow in the Greek tradition, or I guess in the British context, the archetype is Robin Hood, the one who robs the rich to give to the poor, but signature weapon is the bow, and it's always him. It's solitary. It's one bowman who can, like a sniper, who can do miraculous things with one arrow, one bow. But then the thought that goes with the other thought is massed ranks of bowmen, which is a completely different animal then. Often I used to be quite interested in kind of medieval history and medieval battlefields, and there's a lot of that history to be had. And I don't know if it still is, but it was reasonably common back whenever I last paid it any attention to think of it's often called the English longbow, but it's I would argue with that it's more the kind of English Welsh border longbow, actually, in its massed form, operated by people who'd spent their whole life doing that. So bodies deformed by the practice and the enormous draw weights of these bows. So one massively developed shoulder and one more stunted one. The capacity to fire 6, 7, 8 arrows a minute or more en masse, hundreds of archers at once, literally, as they say, covering the sky with arrows, so that you could, I've seen people do it in reenactment scenarios, often with kind of half draw weight bows. Sometimes there are a few people around who can still pull a proper kind of battle ready longbow. And they launch the first arrow really high, and then they bring this arm down, firing each arrow at a lower trajectory, so they all arrive more or less at the same time. And it's astonishing how far those things will go, depending on weather and wind conditions, but it's a heck of a lot further than one might imagine, and with pretty devastating consequences. So often spoken about as being, to the extent a knight is like a tank, an armored knight is like a tank, then a massed rank of longbows is like some kind of anti-tank artillery come heavy machine gun kind of operation. Really, it's playing the same role, the same niche. And there's quite a lot of evidence of that. And where I'm talking to you from here, there are the Gwent, which is the kind of ancient name for the kingdom of Gwent, this particular part of southeast Wales, was very famous for its longbowmen. They were the preeminent longbowmen, the most in demand, always pressed into royal service, and if they were on your side, you had an advantage. So yeah, there are lots of pubs in this area called the Man of Gwent and things that have a heroic archer pulling the bow on the pub sign, and then you get into all the kind of hijackable kind of iconography, like I never got to the bottom of how true or how anecdotal this is, but the gesture, this gesture, being associated with bowmen. Taunting, well, the usual version of it here is Henry V's Welsh longbowman taunting the French by going like this, going, when you capture us, you cut off our fingers so we can no longer draw the bow. But hey, look, you didn't catch me, I've still got my bow, and I'm going to kill you. Basically, that's basically how it goes. So yeah, there's a lot wrapped up with bows. I'm thinking of horsemen fire. That's a whole other thing. Cavalry who can fire bows, the hit and run, the Parthian shot. All of this is, very steeped in the lore of the thing.
Well, I'm thinking about two things mainly, but many others, but these two stick out at the moment. Something that I remember from anthropology, I had my quite a period, being in love with anthropology and just theories and evidence how people invented this or that and how that's connected to people at the other end of the globe and so on. And there's I think that was in Mexico, probably around 1500, 1000 BC. Archaeologists found a weapon that's being used, that's called atlatl. I just hope I'm pronouncing this right. It's a very curious thing. It's functionally, it's a bow and arrow, but there is no string. It's I think this is originally an Aztec invention. I'll try to describe it in words. It's a very curious looking half pipe that's probably around half a meter long.
Yeah.
You put with one hand, and there's a pin on the other end that you place the arrow there. So you hold it here, but the arrow is on top of all of that.
Yeah.
So when you swing it,
the
arrow just
goes
up in the air, and the trajectory of
a different delivery system for the arrow. Yeah.
And I think there was a period where bow and arrow replaces, you can see it in historical maps, in those, like bar charts where they overlap. So it's not sure about the time period, but they've been used together. Some tribes use the atlatl, some tribes use the bow and arrow. And it's like the BMW versus Mercedes these days, almost like that, Probably both groups of people were skilled with this or that, and they were battling between one another.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but the second thing that came to mind is that the human being is the only creature that can produce tools that make tools. And the bow and arrow, and even the atlatl or any other weapon preceding the bow and arrow, doesn't correspond to that. There's no tool being produced by the tool itself, the bow and arrow. And I was really thinking about probably a prehistoric someone, not really inventing, but exploring the presence of a bow.
Yeah.
How did that came to be?
Yes.
What was there for that ancient person?
Yes.
How was the perception of the first ever shot arrow on Earth in human history? Just what was with the person, trying to overcome the tension of the string and then releasing that? If that was me, I would probably go insane in a second. Just seeing how that thing, just disappears from my hands, and it's in 3 seconds. It's just several,
Yeah.
well, not several meters, but probably 100 meters
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
first one probably not, but
Yeah.
anyways, something completely different, completely new around
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Thinking about
And functionally a kind of magic at work, a force being applied in a sort of, yeah, being harnessed, you could say, in a particular way that
it.
that others wouldn't comprehend, wouldn't. Yeah, someone's just done something that's never happened before. Reminds me of the opening sequence in 2001, Space Odyssey, with the monkeys, the apes, and then throwing the bone in the air that becomes the
Yeah.
space station. Yeah, except they're shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, it is probably an early example of that kind of rocket-like missile projection kind of thing, isn't it? It's an extension of a, yeah, deeply phallic
Yeah.
projectile in a particular way. Yeah,
Mhm.
presumably with an attitude of, well, I imagine hunting being the first use of the thing in order to harvest meat.
But as with many of those inventions, I always had the question: was this thing invented to invade, or was it invented to protect? So some kind of big, well, not a mammoth, but probably something big and quite scary for my family is trying to invade my cave or big bam or whatever. Am I inventing this specific thing, this specific weapon to defend myself from a distance because I can see it coming very fast? Or am I the one that's going to get out there and really hunt it? Again, from distance, because if it approaches me, I'm finished.
Yeah.
And I've always had this, where's the threshold between invading and protecting, probably.
Absolutely.
Which is the same thing as with my thoughts,
Yes. Yeah.
Why
It's
am I
there,
thinking
isn't it?
that?
Yeah. Has this thing penetrated me, or has it not? Yeah.
Or have I defeated it?
I defeated it. Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, and held the boundary, held the line. Yeah. Interesting. Very, very interesting indeed.
Yeah. Well, no, just a thought there, but not to flood the time. We have something here, working with something, but
yes,
this all came out from the question on how is it on my end, but
yeah,
I never had the chance to ask how is it on your end.
Yeah, nothing quite so focused, or yeah, nothing much happening that's in any way different than what's been happening for a long time. So I'm aware of the entire kind of experience of lockdown has become a kind of worn groove now. The stairs, the feet on the stairs have worn the kind of middle away. So there's something about that that's very familiar. Yeah, and I guess I've been aware this week since we last spoke of, I don't mean this in any kind of clinical sense, but there's been a heavier, more depressive air around, which I've noticed pass through me, but I've noticed it with a lot of people that I've been working with, as if there's just a kind of leaden quality, which it interested me. I mean, it always would interest me, but it interested me timing-wise because it's come as we move through the summer solstice, at least in the northern hemisphere. Yeah, and I haven't had a lot of time to spend wondering about that, but I guess we're in the densest part of the year in many ways, the furthest from the two endpoints, the middle, as it were, of not that the year is a line, of course, it's better depicted in a circular form, but yeah, if one extrapolates it as a line, we're in the middle. We're 6 months into a 12-month unit. And yeah, maybe there's a a kind of appropriateness to there being some heaviness to that, or kind of leadenness. Not really depression exactly, but a more depressive experience or pushing into, which in the British context is quite interesting, given that it's coincided more in England, but even a little bit here in Wales, with things opening up a bit more. So opening up has not just been this kind of like a balloon escaping from a box. It's kind of heavier, and it's not just soaring, it's hanging close to the ground. And yeah, a lot of people are being very cautious in their manner of being. And there is something a little bit, your image of the cave, it's a little bit like that, coming out of the cave into the brightness of the world, and not just running straight out, but taking a little while to pause, or to at least let one's eyes adjust a little bit to that. I don't know if you saw I think I sent it to you. There was I think it's about half an hour long, kind of video essay, you might call it, by a guy whose name I can't remember at all. I'll look it up and put it in the links. But the subject of it is looking at the films of Terrence Mallick through the prism of Heidegger. And it's really quite an interesting piece. I quite enjoyed it, but that image is used there, that the sense of emerging from a cinema into a bright afternoon world, or depending what time you went in, that's part of what's being played with in the whole thing, and also linking to our bow. The bow I don't think shows up, but certainly Heidegger's kind of riff on a hammer comes up. You know, the hammerness of a hammer, and the hammer's being is approached through its use value initially. So how we deploy a hammer leads us later to understand the hammerness of the hammer, not the other way around. That sort of Dasein kind of idea of it's here, fully formed as a hammer, but I can't really know what it is until I've used it. I have to pick it up and feel it and try it out on things, and then suddenly its hammerness is revealed to me. And I guess by extension, something about that being applied to the artist, or in this case the filmmaker, or that being applied to the psyche, one could say, in our kind of line of work, you know, that it remains pure potential unless we're kind of applying it to the material of the world around us as we find it.
If we don't do something about it. Yeah.
So action, I suppose, has a place within that. Yeah, something like that. But yeah, that for anyone looking in at this that would be interested by such a thing, I recommend, if you've got half an hour spare, it's worth a watch. I'll put the link into the accompanying text with this video, so people can find it if they want to.
I was thinking about that. Good idea, linking that. I've seen it, so yeah, but I highly recommend someone interested in, not only in cinema specifically, but people wanting to see something different as an approach to a common subject that people rarely are interested in, but if they are,
yes,
it's quite a rich experience to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a huge, I don't think I've seen very many of Terrence Malick's films, but it's not the kind of thing you need to have seen the whole oeuvre, really, to still find useful or interesting. Yeah, quite well done, and occasionally quite beautiful. There was, I forget exactly where it came from, it was French, I believe. Someone sent me a link to it a while ago, probably still available somewhere online, of this was really extraordinarily beautiful. Again, it's about half an hour long, and it was a sort of, I presume, some kind of micro drone must have been used, or a combination of steady cams or something, but it was extremely well done, and it was entering into various caves in France that are never open to the public because the cave art within them is so precious and unique. You know, it would be destroyed by the breath of visitors and the changes in humidity and all of that. So the cave was open, but what was extraordinary was the manner of its filming. I mean, the art that is revealed is sublime and astounding, but it was revealed both by the level of the camera, or the perceiving eye lens of the thing, but also its smoothness in moving through the cave. And what made me think it might be a drone is the fact that it went over areas that looked either too precious to step on or impossible to step on because of the kind of razor-like formations. And the other thing about it was that the way it was lit, so everything would keep emerging from darkness and then going back into darkness, almost as if recreating how it might have been to be one of those early people with a firebrand and your ochre on your hand making the marks, or doing the horses and the various other prey species. And there was a narration which was very clearly very French and then translated into English. I listened to the English version because the way sentences were crafted and constructed were clearly not English. They were being translated across from French, but that added and heightened the thing. It was narrated by Marianne Faithfull, who I think herself, recovered from the COVID experience. Yeah. But I will look that up and put that in the links because it's extraordinary, really beautiful thing to see. I mean, the images will be familiar to you if you've ever looked at kind of early cave art and things, but the way of this being revealed, and the fact that the position of the viewer could change and move around, did a very good job at revealing the way artists had placed, say, a horse's head, not randomly, and not on flat surfaces, but on three-dimensional formations to kind of be suggestive of the kind of nose of the horse, or the way the jawline comes in at the bottom. Really, really extraordinary. Very sophisticated.
But that's always been a very sticky subject to historians and to people interested in history of art. When and how did these things happen to be in terms of someone from our ancestors just, well, not having the thought, because this wasn't really the thing back then, but having the impulse to pour it out on the cave's wall. And I've always been fascinated and very frightened and in a kind of a vertigo feeling, even thinking about cave art. It's so overwhelming as a subject that might be coming from me, might be a more universal thing, but the subject of caveman art or cave art, it's really resisting contemporary humans' thinking or reflection. Very, very deep waters that you can easily drown in, I suppose.
Absolutely.
And it's really fascinating how this small machinery that's probably very complex, there's all sorts of chips and propellers that are really linked with one another, and the amount of that being sucked is really calculated, and that's governed by a computer. And it's ingenious engineering in the palm of your hand, but it's nowhere nearly as complex and as deep as the art that it's filming.
Absolutely.
And I think this is what contemporary science gets wrong sometimes.
Yes.
I'm not trying to be neglective of computers or technology. I love it. It's really making your life fun and easy. But just the image, I haven't seen what you were describing, but just the image of this thing, this little buzzing computer-like creature flying around and the thing that it's consuming through the lenses of the camera and then probably casting it to a computer somewhere else. Just the image of that really, really contrasting points of something that some people are trying to make it work properly. But there's always something that, at least in this case, there's something bugging me on the inside that, yeah, this is probably very accurate and beautiful and very well engineered, but there's something wrong with it.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure what it is, but there's the feeling.
And it creates artifice. We have paused. What's happening here? Let me check. What's going on? We're back.
Yeah.
Just get rid of that. There we are.
Yeah.
I was just responding by saying it creates a kind of artifice. You can only see those things that way via that technology. That's not the technology is feasting on the thing that was already there.
Yeah.
From a different order. It's feeding us and being fed by that, but it's not necessarily capable of paying its full respects to what was already present. Yeah. Makes me think as well, I mean, I was saying that it was made because the caves are not open to the public, and that's true, but that's not universally the case around the globe. I mean, they're forever finding new caves that push the timeline back, often in Southeast Asia. That's certainly astonishingly the case. But I read even just within the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks about, I wish I could remember the name, a place in Australia that had, there's lots of very ancient early rock art, as it were, and they're often not in caves, but in overhangs and near water sources, and of course tied to very ancient kind of understanding of energies and landscape and dream time, song lines, all of that. But yeah, this particular one was, I think, in a cave. And I to my shame, I've forgotten the details, but it's certainly rated as one of the oldest on the continent. And the cave was blown up by a mining company who, had permission to do so. There was no objection. There was no, you can't possibly, this is a World Heritage kind of site. No, it's just profit. And looking for a new seam for whatever it was they were after, uranium or gold or whatever, rare earth metals or something. And just beyond belief. And then that makes me think as well, and we touched on this a few conversations back, one of the preeminent, well, it is a World Heritage site, but preeminent British kind of sacred sites of ancient origin would be Stonehenge and the environs around Stonehenge. And there is a proposal that is still on the table, still the government insists will go ahead to build a tunnel under it, a road tunnel, which, by any measure is an act of insanity, vandalism. Even the best estimates of the outcome of the tunneling is that it might shave, a couple of minutes off the journey time. The idea being that Stonehenge is so compelling that people driving the road that goes near Stonehenge stop or slow down in order to look and take it in and see it in its landscape, or take photos as they drive by, and that this slows the traffic flow down and causes this kind of ongoing congestion. So we'll build a tunnel straight under this monument. And of course, regularly in the summer season, new finds are made all the time. And not just new finds as in, some shaped flint or some interesting antlers that have been used as tools like we were just talking about, but entirely new monuments that maybe predate Stonehenge itself, or the encampment that they suspect was where the people who built it lived while they were building it. All of which, of course, stands to just be lost if you drive boreholes under the ground, and it's just insane. So there's nothing preserved about landscapes, even when they've lasted as long as that. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, I immediately remember this is quite a common thing, and everyone knows that. No news here, but
Yeah.
the French name for drawing landscape, which is naturmort, uh, which quite literally translates to dead nature. So um, I suppose this is one of the things that you're describing. People deadening
Yeah.
nature in some sense.
Yeah.
So probably
Maybe
something.
that's what's going on with the drone. For all its
Yeah,
incredible sophistication at some level,
yeah,
it becomes a tool of that mind. It can only deaden, even as it brings this kind of beauty, which it certainly did on this occasion. But yeah, it's just not in the same universe as those who made the marks over thousands of years in the dark in these spaces. It's almost like that's wilderness right there, but wilderness in time. Yeah.
hmm.
And maybe part of the point of wilderness is to leave it alone, to just let it to continue to be wilderness. That's what serves the rest of the human experience. Yeah.
This is. I'm trying to find the words for that. Um,
Instead of where id was, there shall ego be. Yeah.
well, I've been having those. They're quite intense moments of thinking about something from a different perspective, not the human one, not the other human one, not the animal one, probably, but something else.
Mm.
And some people might say this is probably a delusional idea or some kind of projection of anything, but I strongly hesitate around that.
Yeah.
And even this instance right now with the deadened nature, or how people are penetrating nature per se,
Yeah.
and to what extent have we come to invent things that are really an extension of our own dreams, that are really unfulfillable, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Or but the thing that I was having in my mind as a picture was why, but really in the deepest sense of
Yeah.
why would a group of people really go into that cave in the first place?
Mm.
But the why here has a different tone.
Mm.
I think the same question can be asked both ways, sounding the same. Why would those people go into the
Mm.
cave? And the answer might be more of a mundane idea, having the answer sounding like, well, they're bored, or they have nothing to do, or they're scientists, they want to explore something. But the question I'm trying to ask, and this is probably asking myself and really getting it out there, why with a capital W, and really emphasize what's the thing that's being dormant all those years that's really poking people between the ribs and saying, go there, go there.
Yeah.
Do,
Like what bewilders or
yeah.
befalls a people or a group of people such that it's now a good idea to go into that cave and do these things? What are they taking into the cave with them? I don't mean like equipment physically, although that would be interesting
Yeah.
to know. But in here, what is it that does it come in a vision? Do you dream it? Do you just receive the orders and in you go?
Yeah.
This is now what needs to occur. Yeah. Whatever it is, it's of the same order, at least, as the thing about tools, isn't it? The same capacity of imagination and mind and vision, the vertical plane to do something completely new.
Mm-hmm. Well, but probably the the question why putting more emotional value into it and heating the question up and really pressuring that emotional value to the extent of this same question sounding, what on earth would make those people go there?
Yeah.
But then really focusing on the what on earth would push those people.
Yes.
There's the answer probably. There's something on earth, or not probably, that's really pushing people in different directions. You know, this person goes there, this invents a drone and really goes to explore a cave from the inside.
Or another example would be those very early musical instruments that are sometimes found often in and around cave mouths and things. Including, and this is reasonably new thinking, I think, based on new evidence, that there are kind of bone flutes and things that were made by Neanderthal people who prior to that were not credited with having the skills or the intelligence or the imagination to have come up with such a thing. But actually it turns out to be completely erroneous. They were making music just as other early humans were making music. And that immediately goes to the same place, doesn't it? Like, what did that sound like?
Yeah. And even the same question as with the bow and arrow. What on earth drove that first person that invented that same thing to go with probably having a piece of wood with two pins on each side and really having a string around it with a certain length that produced probably not a very accurately pitched note the first couple of 100 years probably. But putting a second one, probably third one, probably fourth, and then there's the guitar. Way of expressing. But really, that's the question that's been bugging me lately, and I just came out from it. What on earth moves people in different directions?
Yes.
And I believe from a psychosynthesis point of view, that might be connected to the higher self calling.
Absolutely.
And what's with that? And how is that distinguishable from the superego?
Yes.
And is there a connection between those?
And consciousness expressed through that modality, wanting or having in its nature to move across boundaries and then immediately find new boundaries. so to kind of move beyond a form that's become too restrictive and then settle upon a different form, like liquid flowing over something and then finding a new edge or a new... It seems to be in love with that maneuver, that motion, that sort of transcend, become again, renewal. Yeah.
This is the same way baby crabs grow up. As far as I know, they have an exoskeleton. And the meat of the ligaments and the meat of the... I'm not sure if they have muscle, but probably something that moves the limbs. It goes from the inside out, and there's an armor of the exoskeleton outside. But there's a point where the body outgrows the armor, and this starts to feel quite restrictive. So the thing that the crab does is hide under a secure stone or whatever that there is on the seabed. Rip the big pieces of armor of the exoskeleton, then it's very soft and very vulnerable, waits for the new armor to grow up, goes a little bit more until the next time his body or her body outgrows the armor. So I think there's something about the...
No, absolutely. That's a great image. I think lobsters or crustaceans do something similar. The thing with lobsters, I guess, probably crabs, some varieties anyway, that they they have a very long lifespan if they're not eaten by something or trawled and eaten by humans. But they might go through this process, frequently, like 10,
Very
12
true.
times in a lifetime, which, yeah, just biologically speaking, is a huge amount of effort and risk, isn't it? You've grown this enormous carapace over yourself that is very effective, but it's now a prison. It's now squeezing you. You're presumably in some kind of discomfort. That must be part of the trigger that lets the animal know, oh, it's time to do that thing again where I shed the skin, become vulnerable, and then, inhabit a new, better fitting, armored
Mhm.
set of ways of meeting the world, boundaries, and so forth. And isn't it interesting that they have to do such a thing in a hiding place? They have to hide away. They have to retreat, or take cover, yeah, in order to do that successfully. Yeah.
Well, from the lobster perspective, this is probably Dr. Peterson's idea of the hierarchy of them, lobsters and crustaceans, and probably
Yeah.
crab or shrimps, or I'm not sure what he was citing about the scientific idea that there's a strict hierarchy of those creatures. But the same process probably can be found in various literature pieces, classical ones. Dostoyevsky has this quite a lot. Many of the characters I can think of, they have well, not many of them, several.
Yeah.
But the most important, especially in Idiot, you can see this shedding, outgrowing, hiding, shedding, outgrowing, hiding cycle.
Yeah.
But not many of the characters survive that cycle more than several times.
Yeah.
And the one that survives the cycle one time more, or plus one time more than the previous one, is the protagonist, but it's the creature that's suffering most, which is probably the idea behind it.
Yeah, that's very Dostoevsky.
Yeah, yeah. And one other thing is that I immediately connected that with Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah.
But not really specifically the history behind the boy magician that's destined to become great, but Joanne K. Rowling's projection of this idea, because there's probably something with her that made the boy being in the cupboard below the staircase for most time of the year, and from this very narrow space, of struggling there to grow, then moves to a magical castle, and he's the one there, he's the famous one. Then probably getting back to that, but he gained some knowledge in the castle that needs space, but then she puts him in there. And as far as I know, she's been battling her own recurring depression for many years.
Okay. Interesting.
So there might be something about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's very deep kind of architecture of much literature that succeeds, you could say, that finds an audience. I've recently reread Robert Johnson, not the blues musician, but the Jungian therapist and writer, Robert A. Johnson. Interesting writer, pithy kind of books, but his book, I think it's just called Transformation, which is, if I remember rightly, he describes it as an exploration of male consciousness, not meaning belonging only to men, but in that Jungian constellation of the psyche, that belongs to the male aspect of the psyche. And he takes three characters from literature to illustrate his three levels of consciousness. So he starts, and they're kind of sequential in a particular window of time around late Middle Ages, Renaissance, and late Renaissance. So he has Don Quixote as his example of what he calls two-dimensional consciousness, a kind of divine fool, really, a holy fool, one who misreads situations continually but is so pure of heart that the transformation is happening on that level. And at the moment of his death, he's granted a vision of three-dimensional consciousness, which leads him to feel bad, because he feels like he's been a fool and he's got it wrong all his life. And hence the kind of importance of the sidekick, the whole kind of Sancho Panza kind of, that actually they're better understood as a dyad than as, a hero and his kind of footman or whatever, or squire. And then the three-dimensional consciousness is literary kind of high tide mark for that is Hamlet, who is incapable of action because he is too conflicted in the third dimension. And one of the unfortunate side effects of being that, and he basically says that's the state of modernity, that is where most modern human beings find themselves, in this conflicted mental prison. One of the configurations of Hamlet is that he and anyone in his position becomes incapable of a certain sort of aesthetic understanding of beauty, and therefore in his actions becomes careless or even just disdainful of the feminine parts of the psyche. So it's like a rejection of the feminine, which plays out in his treatment of Ophelia and then her suicide, and then the way that figures into the plot. And
a word comes to mind.
Yeah.
It becomes sterile on a certain level.
Yeah, cannot act. Yeah, exactly. Like a sterile seed, literally. Like GM seeds, you could say. That's a very Hamlet-like invention. You'll get one harvest from it, and then you have to buy it again from Monsanto. Other GM seeds are available. Should hasten to add. But then the third example, and the representative of fourth dimensional consciousness, is specifically for him Goethe's version of Faust, who starts where Hamlet left off. So in Goethe's telling of the Faust story, Faust is this kind of very successful academic professor, and he is so bleak and depressed, we would say today, and anxious, that he basically begins the play contemplating suicide. He remembers that he has this small vial of poison, and he retrieves it, and he's sat at his desk thinking, well, there's nothing to live for. There really is nothing to live for. I've mentally resolved every aspect of everything, and I can see with certainty that there's no point, there's nothing. It's an existential revelation. And as he basically makes that internal decision to open the poison and take it, he hears this music that just breaks in upon his study from outside, and it's very specifically Easter music. And he puts the cork back in the poison and just kind of allows his nature to guide him. So he goes out of his study, and he dances with a peasant girl who's part of this little troupe of people celebrating Easter, singing Easter music. And yeah, in the duration of one dance with this peasant girl, this kind of entire revelation happens upon him. And then he makes the mistake, as it were, of going back into his study, kind of summoned there by his sidekick, except that now as he goes back into the study, he's followed by this black dog, this black poodle, who, long story short, turns into Mephistopheles, and it becomes this kind of shadow integration dialogue. And he says the critical difference between the kind of Christopher Marlowe telling of Faust and Goethe's version of Faust is to do with the contract that is made with the devil via Mephistopheles. So in Goethe's version, there's a sort of preamble to the play where the devil and God are having a conversation about how's it going on Earth. And basically the devil wagers God that he can, Faust is so miserable that he can easily be taken to the dark side, and God says, no, he's a good man. He's just working stuff out, and he's rather troubled, but he'll come through. And the contract reflects that. Faust is given this clause that if he doesn't say this particular sentence of words, then, which is about temptation really, then after 24 years has passed, he wins his freedom, his soul. He can live an enlightened life on earth. Whereas in Marlowe's telling of Faust, the contract is simply, I give you my soul in exchange for 24 years of, basically full-on lottery win hedonism with some time travel thrown in and some hot sex with Helen of Troy. That's basically what he signs up for. And then it's all about the kind of repent at thy leisure kind of thing. Really fascinating, really interesting. It's a very simple sequence of ideas, but yeah, just that notion of, very anachronistic, but could one say that the people who made the bow, or the people that went into the caves at Lascaux or in Spain or wherever in the world to make these astounding images that we still are, undone by 40, 50,000 years later, and more probably, is that a kind of Faustian consciousness at work? In other words, it's not confined to its animal limits, its simplicity. It's not conflicted and trapped in the kind of Hamlet realm of indecision, but is naturally, spontaneously, it's like post-pact Faust. Faust resolved, that there's a kind of heightened verticality to that kind of consciousness that has nothing to do with, it utterly bypasses any kind of ego or egoic circuitry. It doesn't redeem ego or bring it with it. It simply doesn't engage with it. It outflanks it completely, to the point that ego cannot take credit for the thing that's happening, because it clearly isn't capable. Nobody makes the first bow from an ego decision to do that. Just not how it happens. Yeah.
And I suppose this comes very, don't mean to sound cliche of any sort, but this never comes in peace. The process of making the first bow, the process of redeeming your inner Faust, the process of having your inner Hamlet die and then come back after death to reveal it to you. This never comes in joy, never comes in peace, never comes in satisfaction, or at least not a satisfaction that we might have in the everyday life. And that's very scary. But I was even thinking about revisiting an idea, again, connecting this to psychosynthesis context. Oftentimes referred as a repression of the sublime. The same process. But I was trying to play with the wording to see if it can reveal something. But if there's a repression of the sublime, I'm pretty sure there might be something of sublimating, but not in the Freudian terms of let's reveal where the trauma is, let's connect it or reconnect it and have another way of experiencing that, which is highly valuable by itself, but I'm not meaning that. Probably something around this, making the first bow. There's something repressed to be sublimated, but both understood, both revealed, both integrated, and being out there, not really being repressed and just transforming the energy out of it. Just adding something to the numerous ideas that we have anyways here.
Absolutely. And I don't quite know why. I don't understand logically why it makes this impression or thought come into my head, but the response I had to that is, it's the often talked about in different Western ways, but clearly utterly steeped in the we would say the kind of Hindu tradition, the Vedic tradition, and you see it most clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, the moment, the scenes that take place at Kurukshetra, as they say, on the battlefield between gods and demons and humans divided up onto that team or that team, and the pre-battle moment, almost as if there's been a click of the fingers and time has stopped, as these two massed, vast arrays of armies are prepared to clash, and Arjuna in his chariot, kind of in the Hamlet position, really, basically, of, I can't do this. I can't give the order. It's too much bloodshed. I've got family on both sides. I don't, this is not okay. We can do better than this. There's no way that I'm not going to do it. I won't act. And the charioteer, the servant, the charioteer, giving him the look disapprovingly, and then revealing himself to be none other than Krishna himself, and towering there, becoming an aspect really of all the pantheon of Hindu deities, and announcing, who do you think you are, that you have any say in any of this, and just this utter devastation, this sort of, basically the kind of Oppenheimer words that were spoken at the Los Alamos with the dropping of the first bomb. I am become death, destroyer of worlds. Except the I that's making the statement was that all along, was the creator and destroyer. Destroyer of internet, I think. Oh. Are we back? Yeah, we are back. That was a hell of a moment to lose the internet connection, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And the basic point of that, or one of them, I mean, it's a deeply profound, spiritually intense, revelatory. I don't want to presume to understand it, no way. But it is the annihilation of that Hamlet position, and its sublimation or subsuming into this completely transpersonal dimension. Because what Krishna does is just point at all of them and say, they all belong to me. They're all dead already. You just haven't noticed. You're still relating to them as living things, but they're, the thing that you think they are, that's what they're not. The thing that they actually are can't be harmed by a small thing like a war. So, all you need to do here is your duty, and that is to, blow the whistle and start the match. Which, if you're this kind of God prince, is not particularly what you're used to hearing, really, from your servants. Yeah.
So, just it's not really a symbol, but something that I've been trying to connect. I mean, this idea that repression of the sublime has its probably not really a counterpart, but just flipping the wording reveals something different, and just you can see how it pops many other ideas within the conversation anyway. But what I've been having as an immediate reaction to what you were saying is that this thing can be symbolized with repression of the sublime is the child growing up.
Yeah.
And becoming an adult, but in my mind, there is probably only child. There's no adult.
Yeah.
Thinking about that.
Yeah.
And the other way around is just not possible due to ontology and due to evolution. The grown-up cannot become a child again.
Yeah.
So just flipping the same perspective again reveals something else.
Yeah, it's a one-way valve, as it were. Yeah. And like the crab trying to get back into its smaller shell that it kept all these years. Just let me if I could just get back and squeeze into that size 3 shell, then I'd be happy. Yeah.
Well, some people try to do it. I'm inclined to believe that, and I can see that, and some people do it. And there's no one without the other, in this line of direction of time moving onwards, let's say. the child by itself needs the adult to be there for him or her to be able to grow up properly, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But at one point, human development probably dictates that you must realize that this same child is alive within you. Again, connected to the psychosynthesis context, the inner child complex.
Yeah.
But here comes the distinction between the higher self and the superego. Again, if I allow myself to take care for this child, to make fun of something very serious, will that be seen or labeled as something infantile? Thanks to Freud, probably, or whomever. Don't got the idea. Underdeveloped or psychopathological or ill-formed or
Yes.
whatever the label around that might.
Yes. Yeah.
But the crucial point probably, even there's one of the beautiful Jungian descriptions of what is time. I cannot remember which book was that from, but Jung writes, time is a child that plays on the border of the universe. And this is connecting to many of the things that we already talked about.
Yeah, it's almost a Nietzschean formulation as well. That one. Yeah. Well, we certainly covered some ground there. As always. I thought it might have come today, but it hasn't, so it'll come again at a future date, I'm sure. But it's kind of been present for us, I think. I was aware of it right early on when you were sharing the situation that you find yourself in with the kind of contact tracing and the possibility of infection and having to get tested and all of that. And then, which is serious stuff with real gravity about it. But I noticed that I was laughing and that there was then, there was immediately a kind of reference point to it that included humor, but without that being a rejection of the seriousness of the thing. It's like allowing them to cohabit. That it can be serious and potentially, full of peril and funny at the same time, because that's how life often goes. And yeah, we've earmarked it a couple of times, and I'm just doing it again now to make an exploration of humor. I know you're a great kind of aficionado of comedy and find many things funny, as indeed do I. And it's something, there are peculiarities to humour, aren't there, to one's own, that's idiosyncratic, what one really is moved to hilarity by, and the next person not. So there's that in it too. It's a good mark of something within one. But also it's, we would be having that conversation, we will be having that conversation at a particular moment in time, culturally speaking, where the kids, if I can put it that way, formulate it that way, far from being all right, as the Who said, the kids are incredibly serious and seemingly find very, very little funny, which to me is an horrific travesty of childhood or youth. Because if I think back to my own, whatever else was going on with its slings and arrows and outrageous kind of thwartings, it was at least hilarious, and I knew it to be so. There were constant moments of finding things deeply hilariously, cosmically punchline ridden. So the absence of that concerns me greatly. Culturally speaking, the absence of the space in which one can find things hilarious and ridiculous, humorous, it basically only points in one direction to me. And to put it in a word, it's Puritanism. It's the Christmas is banned, the theatres are closed, there will be no football, anybody found laughing will be flogged. It's, the only way to be vertical is dry piety and purity. You know, if you're not pure enough, and who frankly could ever be so, then look out, we're coming for you. Even as I say it, I find myself laughing because it's insane, it's ridiculous, but it has its way in the world right now. And yeah, there's lots of fertile territory for an exploration, or a kind of drifting down that particular river in our leaky canoe.
Definitely, this is something that has to happen without any imperative,
Yeah,
pressure.
yeah.
But definitely, I'm exchanging some ideas and really chatting around comedy in the past. This would be quite fruitful, probably. And there's something that I've noticed, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But we have a different approach to comedy. As, not as what's funny. We might laugh at the same thing, but we will probably get the laugh out of it from slightly different paths.
Yeah.
Which might be very
revealing.
yeah, and curious to know, to engage with. So, yeah.
And probably worth just saying, tagged onto that, the therapeutic value and, I would say, vitality of humor too. You know, I couldn't sustain working with people in the way that I try to do without, I think, in basically every case, there being reference to things that are hilarious or ridiculous or, you know, incredibly exquisitely painful, but funny at the same time. Yeah, that's always in the blend, it seems to me, and its absence would terrify me. It really would.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we are. Suitably unfunny note to finish on.
I was going to add something, but
go.
I remember one of my first attempts to go see a therapist, just to be sure that I will be a therapist one day. This was probably, I don't know, 15 years ago, or maybe even more. I'm not sure. It was a psychosynthesis trained therapist, and I was having a deep shadowing crisis back then, and I was really exploring how my in some mythologies they call it the everlasting black fire, the black sun, the thing within me that is devastating, and I didn't know how it worked, and it came to my mind as some kind of suicidal idea. Yes. But not in terms of I will kill myself, but I want to try to erase something from myself that I don't find as common for my wholesomeness.
Yes.
And my first session was sitting down, and the person asking me, what's being with you lately? And one of the first things I said was, I'm not sure if that will be too heavy to begin with our first session. I feel like dying lately. And he laughed as if I told him the funniest thing ever. Rubbing on his knee and saying, oh, dying. Yeah, it is heavy. But it wasn't making fun of my pain. There was something, but it felt extremely right.
Yes.
That's
a deeply skillful response, isn't it? When it has to be authentic. It can't be anything else. I mean, that's the highest risk strategy right there.
But probably
that's the not repressing the sublime, because the laughter itself is sublime at that point, and very sharp and cutting through, but lovingly, compassionately. Yeah. Deeply auspicious. Good. Well, that's a very nice image to leave us with, or memory, I should say.
Memory.
Let's pause there. So I'm going to just find a way to, there it is. So hopefully see everybody in a week or so's time.
Yeah, exactly.